They laughed when he sat down. Soft at first, then louder, because his suit was worn, his shoes were old, and he carried a silence that looked like defeat. But before this story ends, that same room will fall so quiet you'll hear hearts pounding, and one sentence will change every life inside it forever. If you believe kindness can rewrite destiny, like this video and subscribe to True Kindness Tales, because stories like this deserve to be shared. Marcus Hill arrived early to the glass tower because being late had never been an option for him, not since the night he learned how quickly the world could take everything and ask for more. He waited in the boardroom, palms resting on his knees, breathing in the smell of polished wood and expensive cologne, telling himself to stay calm for his daughter, Ava, whose picture sat folded in his pocket like a promise. Marcus was a single father who worked nights and studied days, a man who had learned to be gentle and unbreakable at the same time. When the executives filed in, conversation hummed like a machine, then slowed when eyes landed on him. The CEO, Richard Hale, paused mid-joke, scanning Marcus from head to toe, and a smirk curved across his face. Someone whispered, someone chuckled, and the room's temperature dropped. Richard laughed openly, not cruel enough to shout, not kind enough to stop. "Are we expecting guests today?" he said, glancing at the assistant. Marcus felt the heat rise in his face, the familiar burn of being underestimated, and he lowered his eyes, choosing patience over pride. He had been invited, after all, invited to present, invited because the company's numbers were bleeding and someone had noticed a pattern no one else had. But laughter is loud when you're alone. As the meeting started, charts flickered on the screen, words bounced around the table, and Marcus listened, absorbing every assumption, every blind spot, every casual dismissal of people like him who lived on the margins of their models. Richard leaned back, arms crossed, amused, confident, comfortable in a world that always made room for him. Marcus thought of Ava's bedtime question from the night before, "Daddy, do good people win?" and he swallowed hard. He remembered the nights he coded after shifts, the mornings he walked Ava to school, the bills taped to the fridge like warnings. He had learned to turn struggle into study, pain into precision. When Richard interrupted a junior analyst, correcting her with a grin, Marcus flinched, not because of the interruption, but because he recognized the same laughter he'd heard in classrooms and offices all his life. Still, he waited. The agenda ticked forward. Numbers were celebrated without being understood. Risk was ignored because it hadn't arrived yet. Marcus sat there, invisible and present, a contradiction the room wasn't ready to solve. He felt the weight of history pressing on his shoulders, but he also felt something else, clarity. He knew when to speak. He always had. And as the meeting drifted toward its conclusion, with Richard ready to dismiss him like an extra chair, Marcus placed his hands on the table and stood, his voice steady, his eyes calm, the laughter still echoing in the corners, unaware it was about to end. When Marcus opened his mouth, the room did not expect truth. It expected an apology, maybe a stutter, maybe gratitude for being allowed to sit at the table. Instead, he spoke with the quiet authority of someone who had carried responsibility long before anyone gave him a title. He began by naming the problem no one wanted to see. The company's growth wasn't slowing, it was being misread. He pointed to a market segment dismissed as unprofitable, then explained, with surgical calm, how loyalty, not luxury, drove long-term revenue. He referenced data collected from late-night shifts and early morning commutes, from communities where trust was currency and brands survived only if they showed up. The screen filled with his projections, clean and undeniable. A murmur replaced laughter. Richard leaned forward. Marcus didn't rush. He built the case brick by brick, revealing how recent losses weren't random but the result of a single assumption repeated too often by people who looked alike and listened to each other too much. He spoke of supply chains like neighborhoods, of customers like families, of risk like hunger, felt before it's seen. Someone tried to interrupt. Marcus nodded and continued, not disrespectful, just unstoppable. He told a brief story, not about himself, but about a mother choosing between price and promise, about how companies win not by shouting but by standing. Then he did the unthinkable. He corrected the CEO. Not with heat, not with ego, but with evidence. The room froze. Richard's smile faded, replaced by calculation. Marcus concluded with a proposal that cost less, reached more, and required something the room had avoided: humility. Silence followed, heavy and honest. For the first time that morning, Marcus felt seen not as a poor black single father, but as a strategist, a thinker, a leader. Questions came, sharper now, respectful. He answered them all. When Richard finally spoke, it wasn't a joke. It was a question. Where did you learn to see like this? Marcus glanced at Ava's photo, then back up. From responsibility, he said simply. The board voted to pilot his plan. Applause broke out, not thunderous, but real. Marcus sat down, heart racing, knowing he had done more than present data. He had cracked a mirror in the room, forcing everyone to see themselves. And as the meeting adjourned, Richard approached him, hand extended, eyes uncertain. Marcus shook it, firm but kind. He had learned long ago that dignity didn't need permission. The weeks that followed rewrote the company's future. Marcus's plan didn't just work. It healed fractures no spreadsheet could measure. Customer trust climbed, employee turnover fell, and profits followed like gratitude. Richard called Marcus into his office one evening, the city glowing below them, and apologized, not with excuses, but with ownership. He offered Marcus a permanent role, a title, a salary that would change Ava's life. Marcus accepted, on one condition: mentorship programs for voices the room had ignored, pathways built where walls once stood. Richard agreed. On Marcus's first official day, he wore the same suit, freshly pressed, because reminders matter. He visited the floor, listened more than he spoke, and built teams like families: clear expectations, shared credit, real care. At home, Ava noticed the difference not in money, but in time. Marcus read to her without checking the clock. He showed up to school events with a steadiness that felt like peace. One night, Ava asked again, "Daddy, do good people win?" Marcus smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "they teach others how." Months later, at a company-wide meeting, Richard told the story of a man who changed the room by refusing to shrink. He didn't mention laughter. He mentioned listening. The applause this time was loud. Marcus stood, humbled, knowing kindness had not made him weak. It had made him precise. And if you're watching this wondering whether your voice matters in rooms that don't look like you, remember this: preparation is a language everyone understands, and dignity speaks even when others laugh. If this story moved you, like the video and subscribe to True Kindness Tales, because when kindness meets courage, the ending doesn't just change a meeting, it changes lives.